Got a 2015 Kia Sportage front wheel drive. You're gonna do rear brakes. First thing you need to do is jack it up and support it. Get your rear wheels off. Lug nuts are 21 millimeter. And then you want to remove your caliper. To remove the caliper, you need a 14 millimeter to remove the two caliper bolts. One bolt here and a more bolt right there. Okay. Once you remove these two bolts, get yourself a decent flat blade screwdriver. Pry the caliper off. Pull it off. It's pretty light. I don't think it's gonna hurt the hose any if you let it hang. But you should bungee it up, get a hook and bungee it up, okay? It's not very heavy, it should be all right. All right, next you need to do is remove your caliper bracket. In order to remove the caliper bracket, you need to remove this trailing arm. Because the trailing arm goes right here, and there's a caliper bracket bolt that goes right through the center of it, right there, and there's another one up here. The trailing arm bolt is a 19 nut and a 19 millimeter for the bolt. Bolt's 19 and nut's 19. Spray some penetrant on it, let it soak in a little bit. Remove that bolt. Bolt and nut look like this. Remove it. Get yourself a punch. Punch it out. Push the bolt all the way through. But before you do that, see the bolt has a notch cut in it, and then you want to turn that notch so it's equal with the shock. So it will pass the shock. See that? Otherwise the lip gets stuck on the shock. All right? So you need to get that closest onto the shock as possible so you can push that bolt all the way out. Once you get the bolt out, take this arm, pry it down with one big pry bar and use another bar and stick it inside there to hold it down. And these two caliper bracket bolts are 14s and they look like this. Try not to lose the washer, the lock washer, because the standard washer doesn't fit. Mine broke in half, but you need to make sure you don't lose it anyway because they do come off. All right, so now that you got the caliper bracket off, pretty nasty. What you need to do is make sure that the side pins aren't frozen. Make sure they can turn. If they're frozen in there, you might as well just go ahead and replace the bracket with the caliper. And you want to also inspect your caliper to make sure that the boot's not torn or it's got a lot of fluid leaking out of it being wet. This one's got the indication of being wet just a little bit. And I don't see it really coming on. It might be just being road wetness. So you want to clean it out. Best you can, get some a wire brush and wipe that out and push your piston back in with a C-clamp with an old pad or big channel locks. What you could do is pry this arm so it goes underneath this part of the knuckle. That'll help hold it in there. You do that also. So here's my punch I use. All right, back to the bracket. So you need to remove your pads, remove your hardware clips, and then you'll need to clean that surface inside here free of rust. And then paint it, remove your slide pins, put some Sil Glide on them, and put them back in. Do not pack the bracket with Sil Glide because you'll never push the pins back in. All right, back now to the rotor. The rotor, should have sprayed it with some penetrant around it to let the penetrant soak into the rotor retainer bolts. screws, whatever. They're Phillips heads. You need to remove them. There's 2 of them. 1, 2. And you use an impact driver. You hit with a hammer. Make sure you twist it to the right direction you want it to come off. Hit it real hard with your impact, hit the impact with your hammer. Break these loose, then you can unthread them. And you want to smack your rotor with your mini sledge right in here. Want to give them nice good smacks to help vibrate it loose. When it comes loose, get it off. And there you got it. There's your rotor. If you're going to replace the rotor, what you want to remove is this little rubber plug for your adjusters. Remove that. You want to save it because it goes into this hole here. You want to save it because you want to put it on your new rotor. Put it off to the side. Inspect your parking brake shoes. Make sure they're not totally wore out. And if they are wore out, it's up to you if you want to replace them or you don't use it. All right, so now your hub. You want to feel your hub, make sure it isn't, you don't hear no noise or you feel any gritness in it. If you feel some gritness or a little bit of a noise in it, then you want to replace it. But otherwise, this hub needs to be cleaned up, free of rust, because you don't want no rust underneath your new rotor, and you want a true rotor surface. If you get a high spot or a low spot, the rotor is going to do that and give you a brake pulsation. Okay, I got the pads out of the bracket. I got the hardware bundle clips out of the brackets. So now I got the bracket. You gotta clean all that rust out of there, which I did. Do the best you can. Try not to remove any metal. Remove your pins. Clean your pins up. Wipe them down with some Sil-Glide. Rub them all over. Do not pack it inside here because you'll have a hard time pushing them back in. And the one with the insulator seal on it goes on the top. When it's on the vehicle, it'll be on the top. All right, so paint this surface, let it dry, clean the pins up, put the new Sil-Glide in them. Come over here to your hub, clean your hub up best you can. What I use is a die grinder with a green Rolex sandpaper one on it. And then I got this one that goes around the studs. Okay. And the next you want to do is push your piston in with a C-clamp and an old pad. And when you're trying to clean up your slide pins and they're full of rust inside here, you can use a hacksaw blade. Gets in there really good. Just keep rubbing it back and forth. Hold this in your hand, use your right hand, and just take the hacksaw blade and just keep rubbing it through there. Works pretty good. Gets the rust out of there. All right. It's a little treat for you. Okay. All right. I put a little bit of anti-seize around on my hub and they help keep it from rusting up. And then next I put a pad in there, my C-clamp, and I push the piston in. So that's all ready. If the piston pushes in really stiff and hard, it won't go in. And it's time to replace it. All right, next you need to do is get your rotor. Get your rotors out of the box. Get some soap and water or some Windex. Spray them down, remove the shipping oil. Make sure you got clean hands when you touch it. Otherwise, it'll leave a mark on it. So, anyway, clean these down with some soap and water. And when you're ready to put them on, make sure you put that little rubber plug back in there also. Then you got your caliper bracket, you got the paint on it. So now you can put your new hardware on it. And then you can mount it. Okay, you got your rotor on. Put your 2 retainer screws back in. Forgot to tell you, if you couldn't get them out, you have to use a die grinder. Put an X on them, just like the Phillips head. Just put an X in them and take a small chisel and bust off the heads. Or once you get them ground down, you can't bust off the heads, bring them on over here and you have to smack them with a hammer and you can bust them off, okay? Then you can remove them once you get the rotor off. All right, so we got the retainers on there, got the plug in there, got our bracket, got our hardware in there properly. So it's all sitting flat, make sure it's not sticking out. Now you can get these started with your bracket bolts. I got a washer on there, put it on the vise and I pushed it through with a hammer on the vise. Put a little anti-seize right there because that's usually where they fill it full of rust. Okay, you got the copper bracket mounted, you got your bolts snugged up, and you want to torque them. Torque them to 60 foot-pounds. I think 50 is sufficient. Those are pretty small bolts, but you can take the chance. All right, next you need to do is put your pads on. Best thing to do is when you're doing your pads, because right here, these act as little springs. You gotta push them in at the same time. I'll put them in at a little bit of an angle and they go right in. Sometimes you might have to put just a little, grind off some of a little bit of the unevenness off the pads because they're not perfect and they have a little bit of like, see how that right there where the paint is kind of rough right here? That's right there also. Keeps you from going sliding right on. So what you want to do is just put them right on there, push it in there, goes right in. Okay, that's the outer pad. The outer pad doesn't usually have the indicators on it. I always put the indicators towards the rotation of the pad or the rotor. So the rotation goes this way. So I want my squeaker towards the rotation. You gotta do the same thing for the inner pad. You gotta push up against those little springs and then you push them in. I always put them in at a little bit of an angle and they go right in. If they don't go right in, then I have to maybe clean them up a little bit on their edges, okay? Next you need to do is get your caliper. Get your caliper piston pushed in, brush it down with the wire brush and push them in over there. You might push the slides in a little bit and get them in. Now you can get your bolts started. Get them started and snugged up, your caliper bolts. And then you want to torque these to 20 foot-pounds. I think it's 20 to 25, I think. Okay, once you got these torqued, then you need to put your trailing arm back in. Okay? And don't forget about that edge on the bolt, the flat spot. Goes next to the rotor. Not the rotor, the shock. Okay? You want to put a little anti-seize on there, that's fine. I will. Okay. Okay, you got your trailing arm, the hole lined up. Start your bolt, remember the flat spot against the shock. And then you might have to use a screwdriver to pry the arm, line up the hole, and you can get your bolt started and push it in. And then you want to put your nut on and torque it to 80 foot-pounds. And that's it. That's how you do your rear brakes. Now you gotta do the other side exactly the same way. And that's it. And then put your tires on, torque them to 95 foot-pounds. Bring it down to the ground, go inside the car. Push your pedal to the floor a couple times. Make sure you get a good firm pedal. Because you want to make sure you do that because if you put it in drive or reverse, you're not going to have any brakes. So you got to make sure you got a good firm pedal before you do any of that. Once you do that, you go underneath the hood, clean off your brake reservoir cap, remove the cap, top off your fluid. Make sure you verify if it's a .3 or .4. Most of them are .3, but sometimes they slip in a .4. And that's it. That's how you do your rear brakes. If I helped you out with this video, that's awesome. Maybe you can help me out by subscribing. I appreciate it. Thank you.